And your name is David Ross.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I
Because you don't always say your name, you know?
I know.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
so you
yeah,
have
yeah.
to do a little research. You can't just listen and find out every time.
Hi, my name is David Ross, and I'm here with Krzysztof. Did I say your name properly, Krzysztof?
Yeah, Krzysztof or Chris Odyniec.
Ah, Krish. I can say Krzysztof.
Krzysztof, you can just say
Krzysztof.
Chris.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. So you're
Yeah.
Polish, right?
That's right. I was born in Poland, came here as a small child during the military, what do you call it? Martial law imposed upon the People's Republic of Poland, and my parents were sort of waiting it out, and 6 months turned into a year turned into a year and a half, and at some point they said, "This is ridiculous. Let's just be Americans." So
Ah,
that is the story of my life, and I learned English in preschool and kindergarten. I remember being pulled out of kindergarten class to learn English because I was one of those kids who didn't speak a word, and at some time that I don't remember, I became my primary language, if not my mother tongue, certainly my most facile, most comfortable tongue, and then I've been here ever since.
wow.
I have
But
one cousin who moved here to Davis, and all the rest of my family lives in Poland, and I haven't seen them in a few years, but I'm hoping to go there next summer, not this summer.
ah, you do have a slight Polish accent, though. You know.
Yeah, I know. And some people say, "Are you Canadian?" Obviously, you would not think so, but some people know there's something that's not quite local, but close enough. But they can't quite place
Yeah, that's
it.
pretty cool. So I like to ask my guests to talk about, early memories about religion. And you said you've been watching a couple of my episodes, so you know exactly what I'm
Hmm.
after. So maybe just take us back and talk us through the childhood. I'm pretty sure I could guess that you were raised Catholic, but
Hmm.
just tell us what happened and, tell us about the family to the extent that you're comfortable talking about religion in the family and all that sort of stuff. And bring us right up till today, the whole journey.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable talking about it. I had a very happy, healthy Catholic upbringing, happy family. We, had First Communion here in California. And when I was a teenager, I wasn't so ready for confirmation. But later on, a couple years later, at the age of 18 or 17 or something like that, I thought like, yeah, this is the way forward. And at that time, I had a very ecumenical, loosey goosey view of my faith, and I had a lot of friends. Here in Northern California, people are from all over, and I just thought like, well, there's many roads up the mountain. There's many paths to toward God, and so I loved having my confirmation. I loved meeting the bishop. But as I was, even then, I was visiting the Berkeley Buddhist monastery across the street from my high school, and I was just interested in many religions. And I just came home to Catholicism a little bit later, maybe in my 20s. And then I thought, maybe there are many paths, but this is the one for me. And some of it might be culturally contingent, but some of it just makes a lot of sense. It just makes a lot of sense. And there's fewer leaps I have to make, and fewer moments where I have to surrender my free judgment and rationalization. And it speaks to me in my heart of hearts. So, uh, I became a school teacher. Well, first after college, I became a Peace Corps volunteer, and I read a lot of books. And then I was very interested in all kinds of religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, especially. And then after that, I was a teacher, and then I became a historian. In my 30s, I got a PhD in early modern European history, studied the Spanish Empire, which is often vilified, I think, in public memory. But when I looked at it closer, I really thought that they were very heroic, spreading the gospel. And the problem is that in any organization, there are a lot of scoundrels who tag along for the ride, and so they tarnish everything. So for every, Bartolome de las Casas, who should be an absolute, I don't know if he's a saint, but he should be. There's always a Hernando Cortez who is ruining everything as we go. And I think that happens to this very day because humans are humans. And so I know a little bit about Catholic history that way. I got my PhD in 2017. I worked a bit in the junior colleges here, and I worked a bit as a visiting scholar at the University of California, but I didn't find right away a permanent job. So I went back to teaching high school, which I really enjoy and is more stable, more money, and a little less stress than the world of publishing things all the time. So for the last 5 years, I've been teaching high school, and now I teach psychology and geography and history, as of course. And I'll be starting teaching politics and economics, which I've not taught before. The kids are lovely. The kids are interesting. The kids are funny. The kids are really sincere. They come from all kinds of backgrounds. I've got some poor kids from very unstable homes, and it's kind of a pastoral opportunity. And it's a really fun job to talk about interesting things. You probably remember your own high school teachers. You probably had all kinds of high school teachers, and you probably remember your favorite ones. And I think those are the ones who talk to you like a human being and treat you with dignity and respect and talk about the things that are interesting to them. So it's a really fun job. Obviously, easy to say now in the middle of June, as I'm looking forward to a 65-day weekend. But the only thing I need to do as a historian is finish publish. I have a publisher for my dissertation. I just have to finish getting all the permissions for the images. So hopefully that'll be out in the fall. But I think the reason we're talking is because a year and a half ago, I thought it would be really fun to start a podcast. And you're way ahead of me on this. So I'm hoping you'll tell me what you have learned from the path. But I started a little podcast called Almost Good Catholics. And you'll find it in, wherever you search, you'll find it. It has a picture of a dog, the Dominican dog. And I just use it as a platform to ask interesting people what they figured out about our faith or faith in general. It doesn't have to be Catholics. I've got atheists. I've kind of like you. I've got atheists. I got Muslims. I've got Jews. Most famously, I talked to Joe Lieberman, the former candidate for vice president here in the United States. And people just say yes. You ask them, hey, I would like to ask you about you and what you think about the world. And they're so generous and so sincere. And I've tried to get some theologians because I've got as many questions as you have. And I've learned a lot. So the podcast is a beautiful thing. It's sort of our new, I don't know, early modern historians talk about the Republic of Letters. And you can, if you're, Thomas Jefferson or Voltaire exchanging letters, that's what people did 300 years ago. And now we all talk to each other. You're in Montreal. I'm in California. Somebody's listening to us in the Philippines or in Cambodia or in Egypt or in Ireland or in Germany. And we're all here together. So it's kind of a digital age miracle that I've enjoyed so much. And it's just a privilege to share with you about it.
Yeah. How many people help you with the podcast? Is it a family affair? Have you got a partner, like a friend that helps you, or are you just on your own?
Not at all. It's all on my own. I just YouTubed it, like how do you start a podcast? And the first year I did it all on my own through Buzzsprout, which was lovely. And then I had an editor of mine for whom I worked doing history podcasts. His name is Marshall Poe, and his thing is called New Books Network. And the New Books Network, he operates it out of Amherst College in Massachusetts. And he just, anytime some historian writes a book, you can interview him for 45 minutes. Hey, what's your book about? And so he heard my podcast and he said, let's make this a partnership. So by putting that there, it has literally increased my listeners by, 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000%. I don't know, just because of the reach that they have. But I still record the occasional podcast about history, and he promotes mine about Catholicism. But they're in the correct spirit, right? They're asking interesting questions to interesting people, and so that this last year that has reached way more listeners. So,
Very cool.
For us, the fun thing is talking to people.
Yeah.
And however many people download, like I can't tell the difference between 1,000 and 10,000. It doesn't feel different,
No.
Right?
Well, I've only had one video that has more than 10,000, maybe two or three. But yeah, it's not about the numbers for me. It's not about the clout or whatever, or the visibility. It's about, like you said, meeting real human beings across the world. Like, it's fascinating. And some of these people, some of them, the people that we talk to, they're taking time out of a very busy day,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, whether you're a family man or woman, or whether you're a professional with a demanding career, it's very humbling, that someone takes even an hour or two out of their day to talk to me or to talk to you, and it's amazing the generosity, like you mentioned, you know. But we should exchange guests, because I've got guests, because I've got a long list of guests. I've got like about 300 guests so far, and
Yeah.
you can send me people in exchange. We'll interview each other's people.
Gladly. I think I'm up to episode 60, so
There you go.
much less. But I've been at it for 18 months.
That's great.
And so, have you found that the whole podcast thing has just exploded exponentially in your time? When did you start? Was it a small thing? How come it's so big now?
I started in 2016, and it was becoming a big thing in 2016. My sister was involved in the whole podcast thing much earlier, and she may have been like one of the first people doing podcasts. She did a podcast about children's books and just reviewing books, and it was a nice idea. And she had her own children, so they had lots of books and stuff like that. And her husband's very tech savvy and all that sort of thing. So they actually mentioned to me, like podcasting is a thing and you should look into it because you're, you're a Catholic now. Because I converted in 2009.
Oh, wow.
And I was
What were you before?
Atheistic Satanist. Thanks for asking.
Oh, wow. Have you been your own guest?
Yeah. I've had a couple of people interview me. A couple of people have said, "Hey, I want to interview you," and so I've had a couple of people interview me and ask me about my. But a lot of people, if you listen to my podcast a lot, like I've got a few friends that I've met through the podcast, and they've listened to pretty much everything I've put out. Not everything, but a lot of it. And so I'm sure they don't say this, but I'm sure they get sick of hearing the same stories over and over again, like about me and my life. So I try not to dwell too much on it. You know what I mean? Because you can only say it so many times before you start thinking, why am I repeating myself? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was curious, like if you did check out a couple of my guests, if anyone stands out, like was there a guest that struck a chord with you, whether they were Catholic or not, that made an impression just because of the force of personality or the story, or did anyone stand out to you?
The two I listened to a bunch when we first started talking on Twitter.
Yeah.
Was it a month ago or so? And then I just listened to two this week. One was a young Sikh fellow.
Oh, no way.
Kavneet something.
Yeah, I think my one and only Sikh
and
guest.
that one was attractive to me because I have a lot of Sikh students here in Northern California. I think there's something like 25,000 Sikhs who live in California out of the entire world diaspora. That's a significant number, and a lot of my Punjabi students they are so open and candid and eager to share. To the point where you can invite one student to another class and say, "Hey, I'm talking about world religions. Would you like to give a presentation?" They'll always say yes. And I don't think I would have been that bold as a teenage Catholic. So this is a religion, a monotheistic religion that I admire a great deal. And I think we have a lot in common. Certainly the community, certainly the service, and just the decency of these people makes me very happy to know them and to sort of be somebody who learns more and more about Sikhism every year. So I listened to that one, and then I listened to
his name is Kavneet Singh. I just looked it up.
Kavneet Singh, yes.
2017, so I interviewed him.
Yeah. So traditionally, every male Sikh, his last name is Singh, and every female Sikh, her last name is Kaur, and often that's like a middle name that then is followed by another last name. But that's a giveaway. So if you have a colleague at work it's a woman and her name is Kaur, and it's a man and he's called Singh, then that person is probably part of the Sikh religion. But they have a lot of cool things like sacramentals. They wear iron bracelets, and they wear sort of symbolic daggers, and they wear underclothes of chastity, and like all kinds of cool things that resonate deeply for me as a Westerner and a Catholic. So and then I listened to you sparring with a charming young atheist, Alex something. It was much more recent. I think he was Australian or something like that.
Oh, really? Okay. Alex. Yeah. Is that his first name, Alex?
Yeah.
Australian.
It might have been in 2018.
Okay. Yeah. Alex Steer. Okay,
yeah. So those are I just sort of, look for a few just to have a sense of what are we doing. But I listened to a lot more of them a month ago, and I just can't recall them at the moment.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, it's just a lot of information.
Delightful, thoughtful banter, and that's what a podcast is. If you're walking your dog and you want to be with some interesting people, you just hit play, or you're washing the dishes, or whatever you're doing. It's just a little bit of company. And if my thing says, hey, you got 1,000 downloads, I have no idea if those people sat taking notes to the end, or if they listened for a minute and 30 seconds, they're like, nah, let's go see what Bishop Barron is saying today. Why do I want to listen to this guy? I have no idea. There's no metric for that. So I might say I have 1,000, but maybe it was 50, and the others just accidentally push play and change their minds. But even so, that's fine, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is,
I want to say previously I was an academic, and I would get on a plane, get my nice suit, stay at a hotel, go give a conference paper at a conference room in a hotel, and there'd be 15 people there, and I would have spent hundreds of dollars and a whole weekend to do it. And now, us sitting here in our own houses for an hour, we reach many, 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 many more times people just chatting pleasantly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I don't, that's one of the reasons I don't prepare for my my interviews. I try not even to get to know the guest beforehand, like in terms of resume or anything, because I want to discover, I want to discover, and then it's more authentic that way than if I already know everything and then I just got a list of questions and I know the answers. That's not going to keep me on excited,
Yeah.
So very exciting. So I guess we're going to dig in a little bit into your fascination with Eastern philosophies and religions. I identify as a very Eastern sort of mind in terms of I see the mystical side of Catholicism as very sympathetic with, or whatever, similar to the monism of the religions of the East, where the only thing that there is God. That's the one reality. And they talk about Maya in the East, the illusion. It's sort of like the relative non-existence of the creature compared to God. And so that resonates with me personally, even though I'm also a very Western mind when it comes to reason and, proofs of the existence of God and these sorts of things. And it's a dogma of the church that we do have the ability to know that God exists just using pure reason without recourse to faith. So I've got both happening, but when it comes to sort of the existential connection to God, I'm very drawn to the East and to monism, even though I know that there are metaphysical problems with the philosophies of the East and the religions of the East. But it's hard to get a straight answer. This is my problem with practitioners of religions of the East, is they don't really know themselves what's happening with the fundamental doctrines. It's not clear. Like, for example, I ask them about hell. Does hell exist? Yes. Is it permanent? Well, some say yes, some say no. And it's very hard to nail them down. So what's your experience been like? Have you talked to people, or is it mainly reading and studying that's given your opinions?
Well, I used to go on Thursday nights to the Berkeley Buddhist monastery, and we'd always have a Dharma talk, and we'd always spend about an hour or maybe half an hour sitting, and then we'd have a talk and so on. And I read mostly books about Hinduism for those couple of years. What I agree with you about how appealing it is. I think that because the teachers of those traditions have spent so much time sitting in meditation and quietly introspectively asking the big questions, I think they've come across a way of approaching the truth that's very sound and deeply ingrained in all human beings. I think we have the same thing in our monastic tradition. I don't know about hell. I'm very comforted by our catechism that says hell is kind of a place you put yourself. Because I think the more traditional finger wagging, scolding kind of way to say is like, well, you didn't follow these rules. I don't care if you knew about them or not, but too late, time's up. Now off you go to hell. That's very unattractive. Anybody who is beating you over the head with his religion and wagging his finger at you in disapproval is not going to win many converts. Like they may feel better about themselves at the end of the day. They probably won't. They might have more scathing things to write on Twitter that won't help anybody. But as we say, by their fruits shall you know them. So when you see joyful Christians, then you're like, those people are good ambassadors to the world, good evangelists. I've liked the Buddhists and Hindus that I've met. They've been peaceful, gentle, kind people. I know that that's because that's if you live in North America, that's a very self-selected group who are already interested in mystical questions. It's nobody here kind of was born into that, and they could be the most awful person going through the rudiments, the surface actions of some religion they don't really subscribe to. Those people for us will be the Christians who don't act like Christians because of the cultural history of where we live. So if you're like, oh wow, I met this one Buddhist and he was so great, but then these other people, my neighbors, I don't like them at all, and they call themselves Christians. Well, those people, who knows if they're Christians? Who knows if they've even tried, thinking deeply about what they believe? They're just sort of like, oh yeah, I'll show up on Christmas and Easter, and so on. So for us here in the West, it's very appealing to do that because it takes such a leap of faith to try something new. And it's a great way of asking the great questions. So many of us start there and then come back and say like, oh wait, we have those same questions too in this tradition. And actually what we are finding here is more satisfactory. Could be for cultural reasons, right? Maybe I don't understand. Maybe just by growing up in the West, in Europe and in America, that there might be a whole different way of looking at things. But I don't know that that's true. My feeling is humans are humans and nothing human is alien to me. So that was my approach. I really liked my time at the Buddhist monastery. I recommend it to anybody. But I think that God speaks most clearly to me through his incarnation and time with us on earth and the church that he established with the Holy Spirit that we have been enjoying for the last 2,000 years, through which I find tremendous mercy and comfort. And anytime somebody says like, oh, Catholic guilt, like that seems to me the silliest thing to say. Somebody who has not spent a lot of time thinking about what they're even saying, let alone asking what the church teaches about guilt, and redemption and mercy and confession and everything else.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I want to ask about our Eastern brothers and sisters in the faith, the Orthodox, the Oriental Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox, and even the Eastern Catholics. This idea of the two lungs of the church, East and West, and the different emphases that they put, and different kinds of color in the liturgy and stuff like that. Are you drawn to Eastern Orthodoxy at all? Have you looked into it at all?
I really haven't. I was in Greece once in 1999, and I went to church there, and I climbed Mount Olympus, and I stopped by this monastery that was half finished, and it said, "You are invited to stay and build the monastery." It was a sign in English. It's like, really? There's nobody here. It's this half finished monastery. It says, "You are invited to stay." And I thought, like, do I go back to my study abroad program in Vienna, or do I stay here and finish the monastery? But I'm the only one here. But it was the coolest thing. It was the coolest thing. Like, you're walking on a mountain. It says, "You are invited to stay and build the monastery." So I really like those. Like, there's no kneeling. You're standing there for 3 hours in a Greek service. And if you don't mind standing for 3 hours, I went with my Greek friend in Watertown, Massachusetts also. And it was so long. And that was cool. And I liked it. But I have nothing. I think some people love that. I think it feels older to them. I'm very happy with our Western 45 minutes to an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I love Latin. I also love Latin. I just love Latin. So my Greek is not very good.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, but I'm married to a Greek woman.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So she's very.
Do you want to tell that story, or have you told it too many times?
No, I'm not. I've told it too many times, but I'm not even supposed to talk about her because she doesn't want me to talk about her at all.
Yeah.
But I let things slip out once in a while. You'll have to go sifting through all my episodes.
Well, I'm married to a Protestant woman who's a lovely Christian, such a good Christian, has taught me a lot about, just shown me a lot of love and mercy and clemency and charity and all the good things. So, I think if you love Jesus, you're good. And I mean, frankly, I think if you love God, the creator of heaven and earth, you're good. I have no doubt that all our Muslim brothers and sisters and all our Jewish brothers and sisters and all our Sikh brothers and sisters will be hanging with us in the maybe more. I have a very wide view of what loving God looks like. Also, because we don't know, like we're all guessing here, and as soon as we start playing games of drawing circles, and you got to be in my smaller circle, oh, not those people, they're speaking Greek, or not those people, right? That's so human. And I feel like God is a God of inclusion and addition, and a God of just like God of encounter, as Pope Francis would say, a God of encounter. So I'm not worried about like, oh, so and so did something wrong. I just try to make it look cool to be a believer, because I think that's what attracts people. I had this conversation with my dad about a week ago about the guys who were getting wages at the vineyard, and so and so worked from 9 o'clock, and so worked from noon, and so worked from 4 p.m. And at the end, the master gave them all the same wage. And when you're a child, you're like, oh, that's awesome. That means I'm just gonna, have sex and cocaine until I'm ready to die, and then I'll convert at the last minute. And my dad was saying, like, look, if you're standing in the the market square hoping to get a job, and you just get hired at 4 p.m., like, your day was filled with anxiety. We have these day laborers here at the hardware store down the hill. They're just hoping to get a job so they can feed their family. So all those guys who didn't start working at 9 but started working at 4 p.m., their life was hard. Their day was filled with anxiety. Am I going to make any money to bring home to my family? And so I think the person who doesn't rest comfortably in faith during their lifetime, they're like a sea out on they're like a ship on a stormy sea, feeling every anxiety. Oh, am I going to make it? Oh, am I going to be successful? Oh, or do I have the right car, or the right clothes, or the right house, or my blah 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 blah? Whereas a Christian with faith, they're relaxed. This is fine. If it goes great, great. If it goes badly, fine. If I die of cancer tomorrow, fine. If I get hit by a car, fine. We are comfortable, as C.S. Lewis says, that this whole world is one page out of a very long book, and not the important page. So if you can get yourself to that mentality where all of this is just an opportunity to love people and love God, then you're much less dependent on the success or failure of your daily efforts, and that's pretty relaxing. So I sometimes look at the worldly things. Oh, what kind did I get a raise? Oh, I got a raise. Was it a big raise? I don't know. Oh, did I get more listeners to that podcast? I don't know. So far so good. And I finally went to the doctor. I haven't been in 5 years, so we're getting to be middle-aged gentlemen, and I got to go to the doctor. And I haven't been to the dentist in 10 years, and I just scheduled it. So I'm taking that stuff seriously, but not too seriously, because it's all, it's the world of Maya, as you said, and we're not too invested in it.
Yeah, we have to learn to detach. This is the Christian teaching. We do need to learn to detach. My kingdom is not of this world. It's
a boat, right? The church is at sea.
Yeah,
and we're all sailing home.
Yeah, and we don't abandon ship just because the waters are rough and choppy. Doesn't make sense. So you mentioned Pope Francis. I'm always defending Pope Francis, or whoever the Pope happens to be. Right now it's Francis, and he's under fire from particularly from the right-wing so-called conservative Catholics.
Very true here too, and
that's in the world of the internet, it's just all the rage. Like it's very fashionable. You get a lot of likes and clicks if you bash the Pope. So I understand why people do it, but I don't understand how it's compatible with their Catholicism. That doesn't make sense.
That's right. That's right. There's no charity in it, and there's no obedience in it.
No.
so what's
just a lot of internet points? Ding 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 ding.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. It's pharisaical thinking. It's but look what I found here, and is written here in this book, in this law. Oh, I heard that he did some work on the Sabbath. That sort of thing. Oh, I heard your followers did not wash their hands. It's so silly. It's so silly. He's like I listen to him all the time on I think it's called Voice of the Pope, or anyway, it's a Vatican podcast. If you just search for Voice of the Pope, you'll find this, the first podcast. He's really improved my Italian. just listening to him, and he has so much. I can feel his love.
Yeah.
He's a loving man, and I think he's trying to feel his way through a very, very impossible job.
Yeah.
On my show, it's not out yet, but it'll be out a week from Thursday. I just talked to the Hungarian ambassador to the Holy See. His name is Edward Habsburg. He's also the Archduke of Austria. So cool guy. And he was just saying, look, the Pope came to Hungary twice, and he visited Hungarians in Romania also. So he says 3 times. But he loves Hungarians and he loves Hungary. But what does the press say? The press found the one thing he said about Viktor Orban's migrant policy, and that's what they said. They missed the 95% of the generous things the Pope had to say for a very, center right, pretty conservative, less sort of welcoming in the global order kind of regime. But what he had to say was love and praise for the Hungarian Christians. But what could the press focus on was the things that divide us. So, as doesn't Jesus say somewhere like somebody was expelling demons in your name, Lord, what should we do? Is like, let him go. Let him go. If you're not against us, you're with us. So, I haven't been alive very long, but I remember Pope John Paul II and Benedict and Francis, and they have just been such 3 wonderful, wonderful leaders. So I hope Francis lives a long time, and I hope the next guy is just as great, and probably in an interesting way, and probably some ways I don't understand or agree with, and that's fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think the litmus test for are you missing the point of your Catholicism or not is how you speak about the Pope in public. And I don't need to, pretend, like, just whitewash it like a whitewashed tomb. Like, it's a sincere thing that I have where, first of all, I respect the office, and the church is telling me that he's Pope. Like, every time I go to Mass, they say his name. Like, they call him by name. There's no ambiguity. Like, it's not up for question. We don't need to debate it on the internet if he's the Pope or not, right?
Yeah,
And
he really is a father, right? You have a father, I have a father. They do things wrong, but they do a lot of things right.
Yeah. Well, there's that chemistry thing too, where it's like, you could fool me, like you could fool me into thinking you're a nice, loving, warm guy, and then in reality you're an axe murderer. You could fool me. I'm not saying it's not possible to fool me, but generally speaking, we have this thing. We're constantly scanning the human face and looking at body language, and there's a lot of subconscious stuff, and you just have a feeling about people. And I think that I often think about what Christ said. Like, you have to be like a child. You have to be innocent. You have to be pure of heart. You have to give the benefit of the doubt. And unfortunately, a lot of adults, even Catholic adults, are jaded. They're corrupted. And they see the worst in people, and they see the worst. They see the worst in the Vicar of Christ. It's like, it's mind-boggling. Not to judge these people's hearts, but it's like, we need to have some level of innocence and that childlike respect.
I agree with you 100%.
Elders, like.
I have a funny joke too, but I agree with you 100%. Is it's above our pay grade to try to judge these people, and if you're a real Christian, you believe that God's got it, right? The war was won 2023 or 2009, whatever, almost 2,000 years ago. The war was won. These are the final skirmishes, cleanup actions, whatever. So God has got this. And Saint John the 23rd, he used to go to bed. He says prayers and he'd go to bed and he'd say, you know what? God, it's your world. Do what you want. I'm going to bed. Because his job was too much. And he's just like, you do it, Lord. And so we just trust in God, no matter how awful it gets. And I'm sure it's going to get awful because humans do awful things. And, if you lived in the Rwanda genocide, or you lived through the Holocaust, or lived through all, the 30 years war in Europe where Protestants and Catholics were murdering each other over the name of Jesus over and over again for 30 years, and a third of the population died. Like, all kinds of crazy things went down in Europe long ago. And here we are still. We're still going. So my funny joke is there's a husband and a wife, and they're, they have dinner guests, and they say, like, you guys seem so compatible. Why does it work so well? You guys, I don't see you guys ever fighting. And the husband says, well, I'm in charge of the important decisions, and my wife is in charge of the not important decisions. So, for example, I let my wife decide where we're going to live, where the children will go to school, how we spend our vacations. And the guy says, what? So what? Okay, what are the important decisions? And so the husband says, "Oh, well, I'm in charge of what our family thinks about foreign policy and what Israel should say about Iran." And like, okay. So like, it's just like, just stop worrying about things that God has taken care of. You don't have to worry about that.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah.
We tend to take ourselves very seriously. We
Hmm.
adults.
Yeah. Apostles too, right? Lord, shall we call down fire upon that village? Or, Lord, make sure that I can sit at your right hand side in the next. Like, that's so human.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are, outraged, and rightly so, I would say, by a lot of the sexual license that's in our culture, pornography, and all kinds of like attack on the family and stuff like that. I'm sure you would agree.
Hmm.
But one thing I'm a little bit nervous about is they keep targeting this one guy in the Catholic hierarchy, Father James Martin, who's very friendly with the LGBTQ thing.
Ah, yeah.
And I haven't looked into. I did buy his book, but I haven't read it yet. But part of me is thinking, well, is anyone giving this guy an objective, fair take, or is it just are we just hating on him without understanding what he's really doing? And there seems to be a lot of friendship between Father James Martin and Pope Francis, and so then they use that to demonize Pope Francis. So I don't know, like if this guy's an unrepentant homosexual or unrepentant masturbator or whatever, like, I mean, that's not good. But I haven't seen any evidence of that. So what do you think? What do you think about Father James Martin? And he seems like he's being demonized a lot by the right, so I'm skeptical of that. But I also think that Satan's at work destroying the family by promoting masturbation, pornography, and all sorts of dirty stuff.
Um, well, yes. Certainly, pornography is a killer. Certainly, masturbation is an easy slide into all kinds of error. James Martin, Father Jim, in my view, is a really sincere and good priest. And if you go to Almost Good Catholics or even search Almost Good Catholics and What If You're Gay, I have a really nice interview with him because,
Oh, no way.
yeah. So it's that episode. I can't remember what number it is, but the episode is called "What If You're Gay," and I really take him at his word, because I asked him, "Look, Father Jim, don't you just want to be an Episcopalian where you just have gay bishops and
Uh-huh.
married priests and everything
Uh-huh.
and women priests?" He's like, "No, I don't want to be an Episcopalian. My main argument is, look, these people already know they're sinners. So the last thing they want to do is walk into a church and be hit over the head. Oh, you're a sinful gay man, right?" And the truth is, if you look around your church in Montreal, as I do in my Berkeley, in my church here in Berkeley, there are not many families with 6 and 8 and 10 and 12 kids. So I know by looking around that most of the Catholics in North America in the year 2023 are using contraception. And we don't talk about that, and we don't use it to humiliate them. They have their reasons, you know. We trust them. I only have 4 kids. I don't have 10. I've got 4. I love my 4. My wife is a Protestant. I would love to have more, but that's like, everything is a discussion and everything is a compromise. And she did not think we needed more than that. Um, and that's how it is. And nobody goes around saying, like, where are the other children? Why aren't you having more children? And if you're a gay person and you walk into church, you don't want to hear, like, why, what's, they already know. They already know. And I think that's Father Jim's point. It's like, please love these people well. Don't cast them out of church. They'll sort it out. They'll sort it out in their own time. They don't need to hear from you. They already know. I think that's his thesis. I talked to another fellow named Garrett Johnson, who takes the complete opposite view. And that episode is called "Who Do You Think You Are?" And he really goes, and he also is a very sincere and very loving man who lived the gay lifestyle in his youth and now lives, a celibate life, and is just an absolute brilliant apostle to people with same-sex attraction and how they can live in complete conformity with Catholic teaching and hold both ideas in opposition at the same time. So he said a lot of things that are very thoughtful that disagreed with Jim Martin, that I wasn't quick enough to come up with as we were talking. But I think it's just such a big world, and our point is not to find the error that other people are having. Our point is to love them well and welcome them, and I think that's Pope Francis's culture of encounter. So I take Father Martin at his word that he's a bridge builder. That's his book, Building a Bridge. That there's a
Yeah.
lovely Amazon film at 90 minutes called Building a Bridge. It's like, I think you can rent it for $3. It's so charming. It's very much his, it's very much for him. It's not objective, but it's lovely. And if you want to just spend an hour and a half with this cleric who is such an who's he who welcomes gay people without making them think more about their sin. Like, I think you could say, hey, love the sinner, hate the sin, but he's like, I'm just going to love the sinner for now, and we'll worry about the sin later. And that's how people change. They don't change by being told all their faults. So that's my take. I also feel like my job is to love people well and not condemn them. I don't think and the other thing is, I live in California, right? The people are gay, and I was just a parent chaperone at my daughter's middle school jazz camp, and two of the other dads there had husbands who were not there either, right? So like 20 to 30%, I don't know how many of these people were gay couples. Those were good dads, and since they're not Catholic, I don't have to have an opinion about it. They're just good guys. They're good fathers. I don't know. The world has changed so much in 100 years, with the fact that, as a historian, you learn that small things make big things. For example, refrigeration. Refrigeration doesn't feel like a big thing, but it means that women don't have to go to the market every day. So suddenly you can do your grocery shopping once a week. So suddenly you can have a small time job that can turn into a big time job. Obviously, contraception is a big problem, but it's also a big game changer for the world. And so now that there's contraception, women have all kinds of control over their own fertility that they didn't before. And so the world has changed in the last 100 years, let alone the last 10 years, in ways that are still making my head spin. So I don't want the Catholic Church to try to conform to the world. I think that's not the right way, but I just think it's changed so fast that we all should be as patient as we can with each other. And if you disagree with it, by all means, stick to your guns. Just be gentle with the other people.
Yeah. So you actually spoke with Father James Martin. That's amazing. I wish you could put in a good word for me and send him my way. I'd love to interview him.
I will tell him. Yeah.
Yeah. Please. Did you get the sense that he himself used to be same-sex attracted, or he is today, or did you get the sense?
I didn't get that, but okay. What do I know? Maybe many priests were, especially of that generation, that they're like, what do I do with this? I'm not really interested in starting a family. Maybe I will just marry the church. Yeah. But I don't know. Okay. I did not get that impression, but what do I know?
Is your gaydar working properly these days?
It's not as a as a middle-aged curmudgeon-y, conservative, Polish immigrant. I can't tell anything.
What do you think about? Have you read the 16 documents of Vatican II or parts of the documents?
I really haven't. No, I'm sorry.
You don't have an opinion about the council?
I don't. I only know secondary things about it.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, obviously, I know that we've gone to vernacular. Obviously, I know that the priest is facing ad what do we say, ad populum?
Yeah,
something like that. It's facing the people instead of the altar. These sort of things don't bother me. I some people say, like, how can you take communion in your hand? Well, I've always taken communion in my hand.
Yeah.
That's culturally contingent.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with one or the other. But I do wish that people could celebrate Mass the way they want to.
Yeah.
I don't understand the push against the traditional Latin Mass.
Well, I think it's just a little bit of a push to, number one, for obedience, but number two, just because it's like the Holy Spirit, it was a sacred ecumenical council, and it was there for a reason, and it's going to be implemented. Like, it will, so there might be some shoving and pushing and forcing to make it be implemented just because it's been what 50, 60 years or whatever it's been. Like
Hmm.
it's like, okay guys, we're gonna do Vatican II now. Like,
Yeah.
and the reforms are good. The abuses are not good, and I see abuses here in Montreal, like different abuses which are not good. But if you read the documents of Vatican II, the reforms are good, and there've been other reforms and reforms of the reform, and it's kind of hard to keep up with everything. But I think not Saint, he's not a saint yet, but Pope Benedict the 16th talked a lot about the reform of the reform. And I'm glad you mentioned Saint John the 23rd, because he's one of my favorites.
Hmm.
I'm just naturally drawn to liberals, and my favorite pope of all time is Pope Francis, because he's the most hated pope I've ever lived under. He's the most hated. I love the underdog. I
That
love
sounds like
cheering
Jesus.
for the, yeah, yeah. I love, if you want me to love Pope Francis more, then just hate him more. You're doing me a
Yeah.
favor. You're doing me a favor.
Well, part of it is that on the internet, only the angry people speak. If I'm happy with Pope Francis, I'm not going to get up at 10 p.m. out of my bed and go tweet something in support of him. I'm going to go to bed. It's like everything's fine, right? So people only the grouchy people complain. I also think that there's something about, we're a universal church, and we do things. And you go to mass in Portugal or the Philippines, it's going to feel a lot like mass here. On the other hand, part of being a universal church is letting people do things slightly their own way here and there and everywhere. So that's, I think, the logic of the vernacular. And I take your point that doing things the traditional way, it might be subtly divisive. But on the other hand, if that makes those people happy and they're loving Jesus and his church, I don't know. I don't know that I wouldn't make a thing about it, or at least I wait another 100 years.
Yeah. That's how I felt about the jab, when the jab came out a couple of years ago for that mysterious illness that was going around. I was like, I'll just wait 100 years and see what happens.
Yeah.
Where did you stand on that? Because I did interview one Polish guy. He's a pastor, a Protestant pastor, Artur
Yeah.
Pawlowski. You may have heard about him, but he supported our truckers, and he ended up in jail for feeding the poor. Like he was feeding the homeless from his Protestant church. He's a street evangelist and nice Polish man. And he ended up in jail many times for that. Big fines, and our prime minister is suing him for like millions of dollars for being Christian or whatever. So like he's pretty hardcore, and he's very conservative. He's more like right wing than I am, but because I don't consider myself right wing at all. But he had a unique perspective on the pandemic, or whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a conservative Polish man. I get the sense that you're, on the left, politically or ideologically. So.
I'm right. I tend to think of myself as a right of center person, but I'm in California, so for everywhere else in the world, I'm probably a Marxist Leninist. No, I was very comfortable following the rules for here, but we had the money and infrastructure to do it without much cost. And so I wore a mask at my school. When my kids took their masks, I had one or two, kind of like, you could tell from his cowboy boots that he was from a right-wing family, and he was like taking it off every day. And I was like, please put it back on. And then the day they said you can take them off, I took it off right away. And I sort of felt like Elliot Ness in The Untouchables with Kevin Costner and Sean Connery, where they say, Mr. Ness, we hear that the Supreme Court is ending prohibition. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about that? He's like, well, I believe I'll have a drink. So that is my attitude toward that. I think I agree that there was overreach. There were mistakes were made by the people in power, and they certainly had a heavy hand, which is regrettable. On the other hand, I think they were scared. I really think nobody knew. And my neighbors across the street, who are the loveliest people, like, they did not talk to us all year. They took all their groceries and left them in their garage for a week before they took them out of the box. They only got groceries from the van. I remember, because I'm a teacher, so I was working from home and I was teaching on Zoom. No kids had to do anything that year. It was very bad for education.
Ooh.
And so I was shopping for my parents and for some elderly neighbors and things like that. And we were all super cautious, but I just think we just didn't know. I think after we all got vaccines, Like, people should have chilled out. I I don't understand the people who are still super anxious after the vaccination, because frankly, this is the glorified flu, and we don't want to sacrifice the young at the whims of the old, because that's what it could turn into.
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I sort of trust like authority in general. Um, and so I think, especially in those early months of uncertainty, I was very happy to just go along with everything. And as 1 year turned into 2 years, I was like, okay, enough is enough. It doesn't feel so bad. And frankly, as a Christian, we're not afraid of death. So um, it's much more important to feed the homeless, like your friend, than it is to make sure that you don't touch anybody or blah blah blah. So
Yeah, acting like it's the greatest plague that ever was. I bought and read parts of Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset, and he talks about how it's the least deadly pandemic of the past 2,000 years.
Yeah.
But it's a good opportunity for all this environmental stuff. Are you also, because you seem very conformist when it comes to that whole thing we went through, but with a touch of common sense. But when it comes to the green movement, are you buying into that too, or because you're Christian, you understand that we don't need to panic about the green
I'm
stuff?
really not worried. Like, if you ask me, is global warming real? I have seen mammoth bones in Los Angeles, so manifestly obvious that global warming is real, because ice sheets covered North America 10,000 years ago. They are not here now, so it's been warming up for 10,000 years. What this has to do with our contribution, I'm skeptical. And if you just want to clean up the air, that's great, because I love clean air and I love clean water. And I do know that London was a dirty town 100 years ago, and now it's a clean town. I wouldn't make people follow government regulations. I wouldn't impose fines on companies. I just think people get really excited about these things in almost a religious way, right? You've probably heard of this. I'm sure you agree that people are looking for, people, especially who don't believe in God, are looking for something else to turn into a God, or at least a sort of a sacramental observation. Oh, we got to recycle these things in these containers. And, so I think the green movement allows people that. I'm definitely not worried. I love a clean planet. I'm a Boy Scout. We're a conservation organization. I think we should all be picking up litter on our streets. I think we should all be doing what we can to clean our rivers, oceans, and air. But I definitely do not subscribe to this, global warming
panic.
No.
Well, when the COVID thing, I hesitate to say, because I've been banned from YouTube so many times for talking about it, but I think it's calming down now. That
might be a badge of honor for you.
Yeah, but when it first hit the news cycle, and the Western world was like, oh, we have to deal with this. My first thought was, what about the child who's dying of starvation every 7.5 seconds? Like, why isn't that big news? Why aren't we all getting our heads together to deal with that?
Yeah.
Why is that not a big deal? Because they're brown, their skin is brown or something? Like, is that it? Now
that's such a good point.
The Western man has the sniffles. It's like, as soon as Pfizer was talking about what it was proposing as a solution, I read what they had on offer. It was reducing all your cold and flu symptoms. I don't care about that. I don't need that. For that, I'll take plenty of water and good night's sleep. That takes care of all that. Thank you very much. I don't need some experimental gene therapy. But when it comes to all these movements, like you said, there's a groupthink sort of fervor, and the fact that we don't have God in our lives like we used to, like the culture generally is impoverished, and the Bible talks about how we're going to be thirsting and starving for the Word of God in the future, and I think that time's almost here now. But
and I also think there might be awakenings, right? Second awakening, third awakening. Kids don't buy this crap. They know the emperor has no clothes. And as part of my geography class, I was teaching the curriculum, which is all about all the gender and stuff like that. And I was like, look, here's what the state of California wants you to know. And I wasn't saying like, this is the truth. I was like, I'm telling you what the state of California wants you to know, because that's my job. And a lot of kids are like, what if I don't believe that? What if that's not true? I was like, that is a valid point of view, and we can
Yeah.
have a debate about it and discussion. I hope we do. And so,
Uh,
like, a lot of kids are like, what are these lawmakers telling me to believe? They just, you know, and I really love my kids at my public school, and you know, I try to do a fair job to the lawmakers, but kids know, kids can tell,
yeah.
kids can smell, you know, and so I just think anytime these old these when these you know these woke type people, when they get old, their stuff's gonna go out the window, just like conservative stuff went out in the '60s.
Yeah.
And somewhere the pendulum will find it. So I just think we treat everybody with love and patience. You know, we as Christians got two jobs: love God, love people, and God's gonna sort it out. And we just do the best we can.
What's your prayer life like? And I'm sorry we didn't talk too much about history. Next time, if you come back, we'll have to talk about history because I'm very interested in history.
Absolutely,
I'm
yeah.
not good at it. I'm not good at history, but
No,
I
but
like hearing
but
about it.
before we stop, I also want you to come to my show and tell me about your
Sure.
satanic past.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. But when it comes to, I was just asking you, I just asked you a question. Do you remember what the question
Prayer
was?
life.
Yeah, your prayer life.
Prayer life.
Do you have set prayers? Like the Catholic Church is very big on set prayers. We also have spontaneous prayers. You know, without divulging too much that's too personal, can you just sort of give us an idea of what's your prayer life like daily?
Yeah, so I do a daily rosary every day, and often when I'm driving in the car, I used to play somebody reciting the rosary. I recite them with them, but I've gotten to the point where I can just turn everything off and be quietly reciting the rosary all on my own. I listen to the daily readings. Just there's a EWTN daily readings. You know, 15 minutes. You just listen to them, and then I like to do a little Ignatian examine at the end of the day.
Oh, no
You know,
way.
and
Oh.
sometimes I do that sitting up or walking my dog, and sometimes I just do that as I put my head down to sleep. So that's
Ah.
really my prayer life.
Can you
I think.
walk me through your exam? Because I do a modified exam that I made up myself. Can you walk me through
Oh,
quickly?
okay. So this one is there's 5 steps. First of all, you focus on God, and there's a breathing prayer that I took from Richard Foster, who's a Protestant theologian who was also on my show, and you say like, "You are here, and I'm with you, and you are here, and I'm with you," and you do that for a couple of minutes, and then you express gratitude. Think of all the good things that happened to you that day. I am so thankful to God that I woke up healthy. I'm so grateful to God that I live in an orderly country where the air is clean and the grass is green and potable water comes out of the tap, and I drove to the store without having to pass military checkpoints to present my passport and to pay bribes. Like all these things we take for granted, that 99% of our ancestors and probably 50% of the people on earth today, you know, I'm grateful that Putin is not shooting rockets at my apartment building, right? There are so many things that we just forget because we're like, I didn't get to watch my Netflix show because blah blah blah, right? There's so many things. So gratitude. And then I think about something that went well, something that went poorly, something that I'm sitting with, something that like, oh, I'm really worried about, you know, this concern I have. It could be like I'm failing to meet this goal for myself, or I'm worried about my kids or my relationship with this, you know, or I'm worried about next year, blah blah blah. And finally, what I hope for the next day. So sort of a where I am, past, present, future. And if I'm in bed, I'll fall asleep halfway through. But I talked to a Catholic theologian who said like every time you fall asleep during the rosary, your guardian angel will finish it for you. So I hope that goes for the examen as well.
Saint Ignatius will finish your examen for
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
Amazing. Yeah, I read a little booklet, I forget what it was, and it just said, this is roughly what the steps are, but you can adapt it to your own way of thinking or whatever. So I do it in bed, and it often does put me to sleep, but it's very fast. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's that gratitude for the graces received, and then I contemplate also where I've fallen short, um, and then I make a special request for clarity at the end, so I can see more opportunity for gratitude and to see the grace better and to see my shortcomings, or sin as I like to call it. I know it's a dirty word, but
Missing the mark.
yeah. So before we wrap up here, I just want to get a rough impression from you about the Word of God in terms of the written Word of God, the Bible.
Mm,
Do you spend time in it? And in particular, the Old Testament is very tricky. The Old Testament, if you don't have the church, giving you the context and the
yeah.
saints that unpack it and put it into context, and all the typology and everything's beautiful when you have the church and the saints explaining it. But when you sit down and you just read the Old Testament in particular, it can be very, 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 very challenging.
Yeah.
Okay. And when atheists come at us, they point it out, like how challenging it is, right? To how are you going to spin this one? How are you going to spin that one? So I just want to get your impression of the Bible in general. And of course, the good news is we have the church and everything. But the bad news is when you just sit down with it, it's really hard. So what's your impression?
I really believe that the Bible is the living word of God. And if you think, as I do, that God is just not telling me, just not grabbing me by the shirt and saying, do this, do this, do this, it's only because I haven't sat down and looked at the Bible. Very often, I've just opened it and it was about me. And I think anybody who thinks that's silly should give it a shot. And I even had a moment when I was back in my 20s in the Peace Corps, when I picked up my brown complete works of William Shakespeare and walked out to the courtyard to go sit in a chair and read it. And when I sat down, in my hand was the Bible, which was also a brown book of approximately the same size. And so in little ways like that, God is speaking to me through his word. I remember there was one time, and if you've listened to my podcast, you might have heard me repeat the story as you say a similar thing, where my youngest child had swallowed a penny and my wife had stayed with her at the hospital overnight. And I was going there in the morning and I was like, man, I just printed up the Our Father in Greek, Paterimon on Tisuranis. And I wanted to read it. And I was like, I hadn't learned it yet. And I had left it in my Bible. And I thought to myself, oh, I left my Bible at the church downstairs in the community hall. And then a pedestrian walked out into the street. I stepped on the brakes. From under my driver's seat, out came the Bible, out came the prayer, and landed on top of my foot open. So it's like, okay, Lord, here I am. Like your servant is listening. So I think that the Bible speaks to us in amazing ways. I think that everything that Jesus talks about in the Old Testament is building on a foundation that the people of the first century could understand. And I think I'm repeating something that a theologian told me, Jeremy Holmes from Wyoming Catholic College, that we think of time as very linear, because I know that today is June 17th or whatever it is, June 16th?
16.
June 16th, 6:02 p.m. in California. And tomorrow's going to be June 17th. And the next one's 18th. And it's going to be 2023, then 2024, then 2025. And I'm walking down this number line in a one-way street. But if you lived 2,000 years ago, nobody told you what year it was, right? It was the year such and such of King Herod, or the year such and such of the Emperor Tiberius, blah, blah, blah. And that stuff kept getting restarted. Likewise, then it was winter, then it was spring. Likewise, then it was a new moon, then it was a full moon. Everything was always getting restarted. So it wasn't like you're flying down this number line in a steam train. You were walking down this road, and all your ancestors walked on the same road. And if I walk, to the grocery store in my town, I know that my dad walked down this road, and I know my children will walk down this road. So I think the word of God is kind of like that it speaks to the prophets and the patriarchs, and it speaks through Jesus to us, and it speaks to us in the moment. And that's miraculous. And I mean that as in the sense that the miraculous, anything that's a miracle, is there to increase your faith. And so the more time you spend reading the Bible, the more your faith will increase, I think, because you will find yourself reflected to you. And nobody can convince, I can't convince you of that just by talking. You have to go try it yourself tonight after you listen to David's podcast, and you're like, I'll just pick up that Bible that's been sitting there and see what it says. You could open it to a random page. Who knows? I think we Catholics, we sort of do the daily readings, but I often miss what we're reading. Like the saying is, the Catholics know the scripture, but they don't know the address. Like, wait, which gospel am I? Is this Matthew? Is this Mark? So I recommend both.
Yeah. I know some of my non-Catholic Christian friends online, they get a little bit, confused and irritated with me when I paraphrase the Bible.
Right.
They don't like that. They don't like that, but I like it. That's what all the
Yeah.
saints did. The saints did that. Who are some of your favorite saints before we wrap up? I really love, just to let you know, I really love, all of the apostles, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and all the apostles. I also love some of the patriarchs like Noah and St. John the Baptist was one of my favorites, But in sort of more modern times or whatever, I think St. Paul is probably one of my favorite apostles, but, in modern times, I like St. Anselm, I like St. Augustine, I like, Blessed John Duns Scotus. I like the ones that I've read that are sort of theologians, philosophers, and these sorts of things. They're the ones that really touch me and move me. I really love, St. John Vianney. He's not really a theologian, but I love so many of the saints, Saint Alphonsus Liguori and Saint Ignatius Loyola, and there's so many. But
Yeah.
what are just some off the top of your head, some of the ones that you read often or you pray to, have a special devotion to? Like I have a devotion to Saint Joseph, obviously. And we have a saint here in Montreal. I don't know if you know about him. Saint Brother Andre Bessette. Do you know about him?
No, I don't know about him.
So I've got like a homegrown saint here. So there are many, many, many that I could name. But what about you?
That's a great question. My confirmation saint was Saint Thomas More. And as an early modern historian, he's also somebody who appears in the documents that I read.
Yeah,
He wrote Utopia, and he gave
amazing.
he gave his life for a principle. And it was so interesting because he tried everything to just to go along with the world. Like, look, the king wants to do what he wants to do. The king's the king, but the king just needed his approval because he knew he was a man of integrity and he could not give it. So that man, he's my confirmation saint. I'd seen A Man
Wow.
for All Seasons. I
Oh, yeah.
recently did a podcast about that thing, and I love him so much.
Amazing.
So he's the one who always comes to mind. I love Saint Maria Goretti, who
Oh, yeah, yeah.
such an example of mercy and clemency. Who was,
And her killer was good too. Her killer was good.
exactly. Well, that's the thing. That's what mercy does. It changes a killer into a
Saint.
a saint. I don't know if that dude. I think his name's Albert. I don't know if he became a saint, but the point is he became a monk, right? Instead of
Yeah.
being like a violent rapist, he became a monk. So that's amazing. I other saints. I had one on the tip of my mind. I can't believe I'm blanking. Oh, Matthew Talbot. He's not. I don't know if he's a saint. He might be a blessed or a venerable. He's just this really lovely Irish saint from the beginning of the 20th century, who was a struggling alcoholic, and I just admire him so much. Who was able to be an example to others with alcohol, and likewise, there's a Chinese saint, Saint Mark, and I'm blanking on his last name, his Chinese name, but he was an opium addict his entire life. He couldn't shake the opium, right? For 30 years, he was excommunicated and barred from the Eucharist because of his opium addiction. And yet he was able to, at the moment that he was asked to stand up for his Christianity and give his life, he did it, right? So through his martyrdom, he became a saint, even though he had been in a state of excommunication for 30 years. So I love these guys because they are about our human weakness and also about the strength that God will lend us in a moment of truth. Oh, I remember what I want to say. I don't know if you know the Pillar podcast. That's another Catholic show. They were recently talking about these 23 martyrs on the shores of Libya somewhere, where the ISIS jihadist type guys, like one by one, said, like, do you renounce your faith in Jesus? And they all said no, 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 and they all died. I think they're Lebanese Christians. And the last guy was some kind of migrant from Nigeria or Ghana or something. And they're like, what about you? You just happen to be in the same boat as these guys. And like at the immediate penalty of death, he's like, I believe what they believe. Right. And that was like the freedom from everything to be like, all right,
Wow.
and like, so those really holy what a testimony. And when you ask, how do we convince people of the truth of our religion? I think we can say, okay, God speaks to me through these small miracles that I can't convince you of. God speaks through enormous miracles to St. Paul or to the children at Fatima that I can't convince you of. And God speaks to the early apostles and people like this on the shores of Libya who give their life because they believe it's true. And I can't convince you of that too, but you can see that they're willing, they'd rather die than say it's not true. So that for me is a good testimony, which is what
Amazing.
martyr means, is a
Witness.
testimony.
Amazing. You know, you have some Catholic, some Polish saints, Saint Faustina.
Yeah, I'm very interested in her. I'm about a third of the way through her diary. I'm struggling with it. She's a complicated lady. What do you think?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, I read it and I didn't keep a lot of it. I just kept the sort of stuff that you hear in the culture about her teaching, and about, well, it's about Jesus' teaching, the divine mercy. You know, the one thing I keep that keeps coming back to me is how offended Christ is when we don't trust in his mercy. Like that had a big impact on me. But, you know, honestly, I didn't take a lot away from it. It's just sort of the general message. It's a simple message. It's a very simple message, right?
Yeah.
But
right. Okay. So,
you know,
in context, she lived 100 years ago. She was a very simple girl, and she had these visions, these tremendous visions, and she commissioned this painting that God wanted. And a lot of her struggles have to do with suffering in the convent from either like weird little social hazing stuff, or just suffering for souls who are in danger. There's a lot there where Jesus tells her that she's very special, and I think when I think of it that Jesus tells us all that, then it makes sense. If I think about it that she's sort of telling us how special she is, then it's hard to read now, you know, from a very cosmopolitan 21st century point of view. And because, you know, she was also, for about 50 years after she wrote this was not accepted Catholic material. People said is too focused on her, not enough on God. And it's only St. John Paul II, who every Polish person loves, who said like, nope, she's the real deal. You know, so again, like maybe I don't agree, but I accept his authority. And so I'm hoping I'm going to have a talk in a couple of weeks with some of the Marian fathers about her, and I hope that they can set me straight, because for me it's hard just coming at it from the outside to understand. It's just hard for me to understand her.
Okay.
She's from a different world than we are.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, she does love Jesus, and she wants to be humble.
Absolutely, yeah. I was very, very touched by Saint Teresa of Jesus. She had a vision. Well, she was having a conversation with Jesus, and a mystical conversation, I guess. And she said, Jesus asked her. He said, "What is your name?" And she said, "My name is Teresa of Jesus." And you know what he said to her?
What's that?
He said, "My name is," I'm going to cry now. "My name is Jesus of Teresa."
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah, and so there you go. Like, this is, what does God desire? God desires a relationship, right? If God wanted us to be just obedient, he would appear as a blazing
sword
in the sky and be like, yep, okay, you're the boss. But that's not what he wants. He really wants the that's so lovely. That's so lovely. And so we make mistakes. Like in every relationship, we make mistakes. We misread each other. But God will always come back. God will always come back.
Then there was the other Saint Teresa of Avila who said, you know, she's having a hard time with her carriage in the mud, and she fell over in her dress into the mud, and she just looked up to heaven and said, "God, why do you treat me like this?" And God said, "I treat all my friends this way."
That's really interesting. I talked to Saint Teresa of Avila scholar Carlos Ayer at Yale, and he told me the story where she was speaking with the image of Jesus, and another nun came in, and she couldn't hear, but she could only see. And then Teresa turned to this other nun and said, "Sister, go get some holy water." And the younger nun brought it, and then Sister Teresa threw it at this image of Jesus, and he evaporated. And said, like, I knew that wasn't Jesus because he didn't have any wounds. Right? So there is something about that, the suffering that we must endure. It's such a mystery. It's such a
Mm,
mystery.
mm.
But
It
I'm going to definitely ask the Marian fathers about that because it really bugs me and I don't get it.
Well, it was one of the Saint Teresa's who said famously, suffering and death, that's what she wanted. She wants suffering and death, suffering and death. And that stuck with me.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the
No,
little
I'm way too lazy. I just want to just want to do podcasts and talk with interesting people.
It's interesting. Well, you know, the beauty about the saints is that you can find what appeals to you, what resonates with you, and God has a plan. Like God gave you predispositions for a reason.
Yeah.
You also have evil predispositions that you need to fight against. Like I love sugar and salt and everything that's fat and junk food and whatever. So I know that's not health. It's not, I can't just
Yeah.
eat that stuff, right? I have to have some vegetables from time to time or whatever. And so, we know, I think we know, just like the gay people in the church, they know that they've got to fix some stuff with God's help.
Yeah.
And that they're not saints, they're not perfect, whatever. Same thing with me and my eating habits, my sleeping habits, and every other habit I have. It's all selfish inclinations. But at the same time, we also know, we sort of have an intuition. We kind of know, like it's what Socrates said, we're knowing is remembering, like it's like just kind of remind yourself about the truth about yourself, the truth about God, and just be honest with yourself. I guess that's what humility is, right? And the saints have that.
Yeah.
And so we can, we are drawn to certain saints for a reason, I believe, for good reasons. And the saints that I'm drawn to, and the ones that I'm not, I feel a little bit bad, like if I can't jive with them when I read what they wrote or whatever, it just doesn't stick. I feel a little bit bad. I want to like them all equally, but I don't. I have my favorites, and there's a good reason for that. We all have a unique character. We're all different flowers in the garden, as little Teresa of Lisieux would say, right?
That's absolutely right. And we believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints. It's a communion. We're just a bunch of people. We're a giant family. And some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. Some people want to read, some people want to party, some people want to go ride their bicycle, some want to play quietly with Legos. And that's just the way God made us. And God himself is a relationship, right? Father, Son, Holy Spirit. They are a relationship. So that's no problem for us. And there's a place for everybody.
Absolutely. Just before I wrap up, I'm going to look up my Lego friend, my Catholic Lego friend for you, so that you can reach out to him. I'm going to because he's always looking for people to interview him. I don't know if you want to or not, but let me see if I can find him here. His name is
I'll talk to a Lego. Yeah.
John Kramer. He goes from church to church with these Lego churches that he builds, and he considers himself mildly handicapped, but he's a charming man and on fire for Christ and his church. But like I said, maybe we'll do some exchange of some contacts for the guest list. And you've got some really, really big names. Like, I can't believe it. I'm going to interview my very first priest. My very first priest is going to be July 7th. I've never had a priest on before.
Tons of priests. The trick is just to keep asking people. Even if 10% of them say yes, you just keep asking people.
Yeah.
They'll say yes.
How do you phrase it, though?
I just say, hi, I'm, so-and-so, and I have this podcast, and I'm interested if you would be interested in talking about this thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. I do ask. And
I often say, I understand the chances are probably no. However, I thought it never hurts to ask.
Yeah. It is surprising sometimes. But I do get a fair number of no's. I have to be honest with you. I do get a fair number of no's. Yeah.
Me too. It's not that they don't like me. It's just busy.
Yeah. So very nice to meet you. I hope you come back, and I want to talk about history and your specialty in history. Remind me, you said Spanish Empire.
Early modern Europe and the Spanish Empire. So 16th century America, Mexico, Europe.
Oh, are there Freemasons yet or not yet?
I don't know. I don't know. I think that's more of a Protestant thing. So I sort of associate Freemasons with the, George Washington and all them. I don't know. I don't know that they were in Spain. I'll find out.
Oh yeah, well the Freemasons were definitely in Spain for sure at some point. But that's not. But you'll have a lot to say about the religious wars, like you touched briefly on the religious wars and stuff like that. So it would be fun to pick your brain about that. And it's just a joy to meet you because your spirit is so joyful and light, and you
Well, the
bring.
honor is mine because you've been doing this for a lot longer, and you clearly know what you're doing, just with the sound levels and the professionalism and how everything looks and sounds. I feel like flying by night amateur out here, but it
uh,
is really fun, isn't it?
It is. It's amazing. And I'll ask you one favor. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, I do enroll each and every one of my guests in a perpetual mass, whether they like it or not. So you and your family are you're gonna benefit from the graces of the holy sacrifice of the mass every day till the end of time. That's a little something I do. That's one of the big reasons I do the podcast. But in exchange, just ask your lovely Protestant wife to come and talk to me about her faith. That would be amazing. Is she too shy?
I would. She's probably too shy. I would definitely ask her.
You can ask. It can't hurt to ask.
It can't hurt to ask.
Very good. So God bless you. I'm very pleased to meet you, and we'll see each other on Twitter for sure. And sometime in the next, couple months or whatever, come back and we'll talk about history. Okay.
Perfect. You come on and talk about Satanism.
Yeah. Send me the invitation, or you could just book it directly using my Calendly link. You know how that works. So my schedule is very limited because I work full time in construction, but we'll make it happen soon. Thank you so much.
All right. It's such a pleasure to meet you, brother.
Amazing. God bless you and yours. Okay.
God bless you also.
Take good care. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye.